Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to another episode of Humanity versus Insanity. And I'm here down in the studio in Plymouth. It is the evening of Thursday, the 2nd of May, 2019. Now, there's a lot of things going on today, not least the country has gone to the polls, hopefully to give the two lamestream parties, the Tories and the Labour Party, a massive drubbing in the local elections for their absolute malfeasance in public office by refusing to implement the Brexit that was the will of 17.4 million people, nearly 52% of the population, voting in a one-off referendum 3 years ago, yet to have been brought to fruition. But anyway, that's for perhaps a further discussion, because as you can clearly see, I'm joined in the studio this evening by my good friend, Mr. Noakes, David Noakes. So, David.
Hello, Ian.
Hey, and it's great to be able to shake your hand that's not being supervised by Her Majesty's prison guards.
Yeah.
So, 9th day out.
Yes, I'm still quite ill, and I'm making progress in the last couple of days.
I mean, obviously, it's a massive shock to the system. I do believe this is the first time that you've experienced the inside of Her Majesty's prisons.
Well, clearly, I have not been honest enough, because if I had been more honest, I would have been in prison more often.
Apparently.
Yes.
Apparently, because the establishment does not respect honesty, of course.
Absolutely.
It only wants your money.
Yeah.
So, obviously, for people who perhaps are tuning into this and aren't aware of the history, we need to give a little bit of a background to what led to you being incarcerated in Wandsworth Prison for, 5 months? So I think we rolled the clock back to about 2009, about just over a decade ago, because you were actually working in the banking system. You were working with ING Bank in Belgium, I believe, in IT. Yeah,
well, Parliament has now killed 2 million people since GC-MAF was discovered in the human body in the 1980s. And I'd been annoyed all my life that people were dying of cancer and there was apparently nothing to do about it. But then my life changed irrevocably for the worse when Ian R. Crane of Humanity versus Insanity told me in a lecture at Ghent University in Belgium, where I was working, that there was indeed a cure for cancer, and it was called GC-MAF. So I went home, stuck it into Google, and there it was. In those days, which was 2009, there were 32 research papers from 70 scientists from 5 nations, which proved beyond all doubt that GC-MAF is the body's way of curing cancer, and it works fabulously. And I read an article written in President Scott Tipp's magazine, the National Health Freedom magazine, written by Bill Sardi, which explained very simply what GC-MAF was. So I then set about reading the 32 scientific research papers, and it was blindingly obvious that this was the cure for cancer. And then on the 30th of January 2010, I met a new girlfriend, and then discovered a week later that she was a biomedical scientist. And everything from that point on was just all incredible serendipities in that everything fitted together, because it shouldn't have been possible for me to make GC-MAF. It is incredibly difficult.
So this is just put the trail together, because I appreciate you crediting me, I use that term loosely, with starting your journey down the GC-MAF path. But I actually need to acknowledge the role that Scott Tipp's played in drawing my attention to it, because back in 2007 and 8 and into 9, I was touring the UK and other places around Europe, talking about Codex Alimentarius, which of course is the agenda that dates back to the 1960s, which is the globalist agenda to eradicate all natural healthcare products and also to destroy all natural farming and agriculture. And I happened to be doing a few presentations with Scott when Scott had told me about GCMAF, and I made this observation in that presentation at Ghent University as a throwaway comment, and we didn't talk. I didn't even know you were at the Ghent University event. It was only much later when you actually met with me in Peterborough, I think, and you told me that that comment had triggered you off down this particular journey. But it's full credit to you and to your subsequent girlfriend, who we'll meet later, and it's full credit to you for picking up the gauntlet and running with it, because at that time you had the financial resources to pursue this, but you didn't have a medical background or even a medical scientific background. So you were running with this as a layman, but what you've achieved in a few years, and unfortunately paid a horrendous price for it, what you have achieved is something that the medical establishment and the pharmaceutical industry wants to make sure that you never achieve again, and that nobody else thinks they can actually replicate your achievements in curing what have previously been labelled as incurable diseases.
No, Ian, the simple fact is it's all your fault, and there's no point you trying to get out of it.
Okay. All right, so mea culpa. That accepted, and I'm obviously deeply saddened that, unfortunately the establishment and the corporatocracy has insisted on you, I say, going through this torture, because that's what it is now for the past 4 years, because it's 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, since you first appeared on Humanity vs. Insanity, and you were actually, we did it via Skype, you were in Guernsey at the time, and that was just a few weeks after your premises had been raided at the behest of the MHRA. So after you had met with your girlfriend, who turned out serendipitously to be a biochemist, and then you decided that you would look at the manufacturing process of GCMAF with a view to providing it to people who had effectively been written off by the medical establishment, because you focused on people that had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and effectively told they only had a few weeks to live.
Yeah, we were only interested in terminal stage 4s, yep.
So this is a very bold statement, and obviously you were based in Guernsey at the time. Now I know as you were working with the full acknowledgement of the Guernsey healthcare authorities at the time, and they didn't seem to have too much of a problem until the MHRA came along.
That's right.
But you treated, I believe, 144 people on Guernsey free of charge.
Yes, that's right. We treated 11,500 in total. About 25% without charge. All the people on Guernsey without charge, which I think was 199 in total, we were seeing them at the rate of 8 people a day at our house. Well, Lynn was seeing them. I was at work. She had a small team in our house receiving the patients. So in a course of 200-day year, 8 patients a day, she was seeing 1,600 appointments in a year in our house. So that was fascinating for us because, of course, we became friends with the people. We watched them recover from their cancers and all sorts of other serious diseases. And, you know, it is so fabulous when someone is saved from cancer or a serious disease. It's a fabulous feeling.
So the people that you were working with at that point had been through the orthodoxy of chemo or radiotherapy. That hadn't worked. Well, maybe it had. It had worked in perhaps a different way because it had sent them along the proverbial death pathway.
No one ever came to us first. They always went to see the doctors and take chemotherapy, which would nearly kill them. And when they were nearly dead, then they'd come and see us.
So they had been written off. They'd effectively been told, put your affairs in order, because, basically you've just got a few weeks to live. And obviously they had nowhere else to go, so they came to you.
Yep.
And, of course, the establishment tries to spin that as you preying on vulnerable people. But they had got nowhere else to go. They came to you, and not only were you not preying on them because you were providing the GC-MAF free of charge, but actually many of them, all of them, recovered?
80%. So, yes, this is very definitely preying on people. Chemotherapy is a poison which works 2.3% of the time on the occasions, according to the Journal of Clinical Oncology, who went through 71,000 cases, 2.3% success rate. So GC-MAF had a 75% success rate in our Swiss clinic. We didn't have one in England, and it had an 89% success rate in our Guernsey clinic.
Now, I think it's also important to make the observation that you have always stated that GC-MAF alone isn't the panacea. It has to be in conjunction with carefully controlled diet as well. Well,
the first year we succeeded with 5% of terminal stage 4 cancer patients. That led us to keep them alive for long enough that we could find out a bit more about it. And we eventually came down to 20,000 IU of vitamin D a day. GC-MAF is part of the vitamin D system in the body, and it assumes normal levels of vitamin D. No one with cancer has normal levels of vitamin D, but with 20,000 IU a day, you can kid the body that it has normal levels of vitamin D. So that's the first step. The second step is give up sugar, because sugar is the only thing that cancer eats. And thirdly, give up carbohydrates because they become sugar in the body. Now, of course, what the doctors were doing was pumping them through with chemotherapy at the extremely reasonable price of only £40,000 a round. GC-MAF was £380 a round, but we used to give it away completely free.
So the diet is a crucial element here. Now, the reason I flagged this up is because I have a very good friend who went to see an oncologist having the symptoms of prostate cancer. And after an MRI scan, was told by the oncologist that he needed a biopsy. Now, he refused a biopsy. But in the course of the discussion, he actually asked the oncologist, he said, if I change my diet, would that perhaps help? And what this guy told me was that the response from the oncologist was, well, I don't really know because that's not my field of expertise. So here we've got a consultant oncologist working within the NHS whose only response is orthodoxy, i.e. biopsy, chemo and or radiotherapy, which is pretty much guaranteed to terminate your time on this mortal coil.
Yeah, I'm afraid all oncologists lie. Blatant lies. Firstly, diet is absolutely vital because sugar is the only thing that cancer eats. And of course, carbohydrates become sugar in the body. I mean, if they don't even know that much, they have absolutely no excuse to be an oncologist whatsoever.
Yet they are hamstrung, of course, by the 1939 Cancer Act, which effectively prevents them from discussing any alternatives other than those approved by the MHRA, effectively.
Well, that's two different questions. The 1939 Cancer Act is an English act which prevents you from discussing the possibility that cancer can be cured. And that is the most stupid, disgusting act on the statute book, must be, kills thousands of people every year. Then, of course, the big pharmaceutical companies have been allowed by a slovenly parliament to write all the medicines laws. And they have written the medicines laws so that only they can play. So that means any new treatment gets excluded by the medicines laws, as does any new limited company with fabulous new ideas, or a company like my company, Immunobiotech.
So, unfortunately, if you happen to live almost anywhere in the developed world and you develop cancer, the moment that you effectively give yourself over to the medical establishment, you're as good as dead.
Well, they'll always do things to kill you. They'll tell you diet does not make a difference. They'll pump you full of the poison of chemotherapy, which can lose eyes, you can lose lungs, and your liver, and if you are terminal stage 4, it generally kills you in 2 months flat. They'll plaster you with radiotherapy, which can be absolutely horrific. Your whole body can end up bleeding. They'll do everything that they should not do. Actually, cancer is not a particularly difficult disease. Cancer with GC-MAF is fairly minor. It doesn't need any of these sort of things.
Because the reality is, and I learned a lot, obviously, by sitting through the Newman hearing when this was back in last November, when which Judge Nicholas Lorraine Smith had decreed was necessary, pending your sentencing. And one of the observations that he made was that obviously he did not question the efficacy of GC-MAF. So he accepted that GC-MAF was a viable product. It did what it said on the tin. And he actually made the statement in his summing up prior to determining the sentence. And he said that he had no doubt that GC-MAF had been incredibly effective for a considerable number of people, and it was his hope that it would be incredibly successful for a number of people in the future. But that, of course, would not be the case under the current situation, where the MHRA actually prevents, as you rightly say, any such product ever coming to market.
That was the most naive comment I ever heard Judge Lorraine Smith make, that he's looking forward to GC-MAF being available to the public. The MHRA will never make GC-MAF available to the public because it is a naturally occurring human substance over which they should have no jurisdiction whatsoever, and it will devastate the profits of the big pharmaceutical companies, and the MHRA has big pharma directors, including its chairman, Mr. Ian Hudson, on its board. And there is not a hope in hell of the MHRA ever licensing GC-MAF. And I'm stunned at the ignorance of Judge Lorraine Smith for saying that.
Well, and, the MHRA, by the way, is the Medicines and Health Care Regulatory Agency. And, in fact, this is a website that I would encourage people to take a look at. If we can just flick over to this now. This is mhracorrupt.st. It's obviously hosted somewhere out of the reach of the British censorship mechanism that is increasing.
Well, we used to have a website called gcmaf.co.uk, and the British took it down. So then we had it up in the EU, gcmaf.eu, and they took it down. So we ended up with gcmaf.se, Sweden. WikiLeaks is in Sweden because Sweden honestly leaves websites up. So that's certainly not England.
No, absolutely. And I mean, here, there's numerous contributors. And I'm going to obviously leave people to wade through it at their leisure because there's a lot of material here. But having worked through this material, and of course, we always encourage people to check and double check. Don't take anything you read or hear at face value. but it shouldn't take people too long to realise that actually, and of course there are other very effective methods of treating cancer and other supposedly incurable diseases, other than GC-MAF, but we're focusing on GC-MAF here today. But the MHRA and the pharmaceutical industry have a combined agenda to make sure these products never come to market. Now, one of the other things I learned in the court hearing was that one of your largest customers for GC-MAF was Dr. Jeffrey Bradstreet in the USA, and I believe that he had certainly from his research and his trials had established that GC-MAF was remarkably effective in treating autism, which I know came as a bit of a shock to you the first time he told you that.
Well, I would never give any product to anyone that I hadn't taken myself. So I took the first vial of everything, and GC-MAF cured for me 7 diseases, including hay fever and back pain, and I had arthritis on my knuckles. I had Dubitons contractions. All of those diseases went athlete's foot, and I've never, ever had them come back. I had a lifetime's athlete's foot, never had them come back. Our first ever case was a chap with sinusitis who had had it for the beginning of 2011. He had had it for 15 years, had been to 10 doctors, got absolutely nowhere, and he was totally recovered by our first ever vial of GC-MAF that we shipped out in 2 weeks, and he was over the moon. And a lot of interesting things happened. I mean, Gregorio Cuesta had, from Dr. Anderson, we may hear about him again, in Texas, said he would be dead in 4 months because his PSA was 765 and he was terminal prostate cancer. And he switched to our Dr. Rao in the USA, and he put him on our GC-MAF, and he went down to a PSA of 10.9 in 5 months, and then the next month his doctor told him he was cured. But Dr. Jeffrey Bradstreet rang me up in May 2011 and said he wanted to use GC-MAF for autism. I said, well, I don't think it'll work, but, you know, it's a free world. Well, it's not really, but, you know, you can try it if you want to. And 8 weeks later, he said he had 15 children no longer autistic, the best results he'd ever got. 15% of children were no longer autistic after 8 weeks. We wrote a scientific research paper with him, well, 2 actually, and the second one was the ultrasound method of treating autism with GC-MAF. So basically, you put an ultrasound probe on the temple, and that drives the GC-MAF across the blood-brain barrier. And with that technique, we were taking non-verbal autistic children, making them verbal, and sending them back to normal school in 1 week flat. 60% of autistic children. So you would have thought that, you know, okay, America hasn't got round yet to peerages or knighthoods, but you would have thought he would have got one of those two. Instead, someone, probably the Food and Drug Administration, but it could have been anyone in Big Pharma, kindly sent round a assassin and shot him dead in the chest. And they've now killed 102 holistic doctors in a similar way.
Now, of course, it was reported as a suicide. He was found the day after his premises were raided
By the FDA.
By the FDA, which was on the instruction of the MHRA.
No, they wouldn't have been. It would have been on instruction of big pharmaceutical companies.
Okay, well, yeah. I read a report that said that the MHRA had contacted the FDA, and the FDA then went after him, and they raided his laboratories, and it was the following day that he was found with a bullet wound in his chest, lying face down in one of the rivers in South Carolina.
Yeah. very clever man. There's not many people who can shoot themselves in the chest and then throw your own body in the river, but there you go. And all these 102 doctors have been signed off as suicides. Not one of them are. They're all very level-headed people, quite brilliant doctors, a lot of them. If they were going to commit suicide, they'd obviously use barbiturates or something like that, and not one of them is ever likely to do that.
I mean, you made the observation there, you know, when you were talking about Dr. Bradstreet purchasing GC-MAF from you for the use that you hadn't considered previously, and you said it's a free world. And of course, this is the mantra that's put out by the leadership, the political leadership, that, you know, we live in the free world, the Western world is the free world. And, you know, George W. Bush famously made the observation after 9/11 that they hate us for our freedoms. And yet what we are discussing here is clearly indicating that we don't have those freedoms. The corporatocracy has free rein to use humanity not only as its guinea pigs, but literally as its revenue stream, because actually it doesn't want to try these products. I mean, I'm guessing that they already acknowledge that they probably work, which is why they put such enormous effort into shutting them down and to demonizing them and to demonizing anybody who has the audacity to think that they can bring these to market. Because the onslaught, the vitriol that has been poured out, well, basically over the last sort of 4 years, is just staggering. And, you know, what was interesting is that even in the court hearings, the BBC reporter who was in the court was clearly hearing something very different from what I was hearing. And what was also interesting to me was that the only day that I couldn't make it to the hearing, the judge actually put a news blackout, preventing the BBC from issuing any report that day. But then once I was back in the court, he lifted the news blackout. So I think Nicholas Lorraine Smith, I'm not in any way defending his ultimate decision, but I think he realised he was absolutely caught between a rock and a hard place. And I seriously hope he didn't sleep particularly well during and after, because, you know, one of the other observations that he made during the court hearing was that this was not a court of morality. It was a court of law. Now, that is very telling, because by definition, what he was really saying is this is a court to protect the dominion of the corporatocracy. It's not a court to establish whether the corporatocracy is actually behaving in an ethical manner. And so consequently, that's why he was trying to keep everything on track in terms of the focus of whether or not you manufactured and distributed an unlicensed medicine. And what he was very, very uncomfortable with was the fact that it was unlicensed. It was still remarkably effective.
Right, well, we had no option. The MHRA is never, and we knew this, never ever going to license GC-MAF. It'll wipe out the $200 billion revenue from chemotherapy, and there are 50 other drugs that can only be treated effectively by GC-MAF. So they're going to lose many, many, many billions. So we either had to stop making the product and run for the hills, or just accept the fact that we had to make it without a license, because that's the only way it was going to be. So we decided to make it without a license, secure in the knowledge that a British company, GlaxoSmithKline, had made Avandia. Avandia caused 83,000 deaths in the USA, and they got a $3 billion fine. They still made colossal sums of money out of it. The $3 billion didn't even touch them. But in the UK, the GlaxoSmithKline didn't even get a slap wrist or a fine. They got absolutely nothing, because GSK has two of their own directors on the board of the MHRA. And at the time, it was Ian Heddle and Gerald Heddle and Ian Hudson. And they saw to it that GSK got off without any fine at all. So we thought, well, if they can get off scot-free with killing 83,000. We, who have never, ever killed anyone and have cured ridiculously large numbers of people, are perfectly safe. But oh no. The MHRA carried out 33 persecutions of us without the courts. They raided us 14 times, closed all our bank accounts, which caused all our 27 staff, 4 brilliant scientists, 7 good doctors, 2 ultrasound specialists and nurses and admin staff to be fired. They committed perjury in our to the Canterbury Crown Court to seize all our assets. And the worst thing of all, of course, is they banned GC Math. And we generally had about 200 people at any one time dying of disease who were being cured of it by GC Math. And of course, that is the 200 people who, when the GC Math was banned, then died of their terminal stage 4 cancers. And we had to watch people who we knew had an excellent chance of being cured. We had to watch them die. And that was ultimate trauma. And, you know, it's affected all of us badly. I mean, I ended up with 8 minor illnesses and permanent pain, and all of us have trauma from that. The worst case was someone, you may remember, Ian, who spoke at AV6, Gail Bray. She came to us, our first ever terminal stage 4 patient. She had ovarian cancer in May 2010, and she had secondaries to the lung. She had about 3 months to live. We put her on GC Math. In 3 months, it got rid of the secondaries on the lung. We then didn't have any math until our new first ever batch was made. So that set her back for a bit, but it then halved her ovarian cancer, and she had it plucked out and she was cancer-free. Well, she spoke at your conference 4 years later, but then in 2018, she bought Monsanto Roundup glyphosate weed killer. And one of the 30 diseases that Monsanto glyphosate gives you is breast cancer. She got it, just trillionths of a gram of Monsanto will give you breast cancer. And of course, normally it would be no trouble at all, just give us some more GC Math, all go in a couple of months, and she'll carry on and live through till 90. But no, she died, and we went to her funeral. It's the only funeral we attended because with 200 deaths, we were under so much trauma, we couldn't attend anyone else's. So a terrible time. And then
there was a case in Cyprus, I seem to remember as well, where the Cypriot authorities raided a lady's house.
Yeah, that's Joanne Spinks. So she came to us in 2012 with terminal stage 4 liver cancer, and she'd been to 3 sets of doctors, one of them in Belgium, one in London, and one in Guernsey, who told us she had 2 months to live. So we put her on GC Math, of course, and in 2017, she was still very much alive and full of the joys of life, so she had already lived another 5 years. But she never got beyond needing GC Math because she had very difficult daughters and she was under permanent stress, so her lifestyle never changed enough. You know, you catch cancer from your surroundings, and she was still catching cancer from her surroundings, so she needed GC Math all the time. Well, she was on the orders of the MHRA, she was twice raided by Europol to search her house for GC Math, and without any, she died in May 2017, like Gail Bray, a really lovely woman. And she was murdered, as was Gail Bray.
Well, I mean, basically, I have actually labelled the Gerald Heddle. I labelled him a few years ago as the UK's state executioner.
That's correct.
Because that's exactly what he is. And, you know, he indirectly probably has almost as much blood on his hands as Tony Blair.
Well, no, he probably has a lot more blood on his hands because, with just 3 drugs, Avandia, opioids, and Actos, the MHRA's killed 450,000. So they've probably killed, well, let's say 1,600 MAF patients. But, with the number, the MHRA seems to be killing about 200,000 people. The website we've just been looking at, mhracorrupt.st, calculates the MHRA as killing 200,000 people. So let's say Blair killed 1.5 million in Iraq. And, of course, no one counts the million children horrifically mutated by the depleted uranium.
Yeah.
And some of these children have 2 heads or no head, or 1 head with 1 eye in it. Thank you very much, Tony Blair and George Bush. So I suppose Parliament's killed, you can say, 2 million people by concealing the discovery of GC-MAF, and Tony Blair and George Bush have killed 1.5 million, 2.5 million with the depleted uranium. So it's a fairly close run thing.
Well, and of course, I mean, the depleted uranium is about as carcinogenic as it can get.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So right, yeah. GC-MAF would be a great help, but of course it's just not made available. I'm just going to go back on something you said, just to clarify for people who perhaps are only listening out of half an ear. You said about catching cancer.
Yeah.
And I mean, some people are going to go, well, you don't catch cancer. But of course, your phraseology there is simply about the fact that there are carcinogenic triggers.
That's right.
Which trigger and break through the body's immune system. Because again, one of the things I learned in the court hearing was that every one of us has cancer within us, and the body is dealing with it on a real-time basis, an ongoing basis. It's only when the immune system, literally for whatever reason, breaks down, that cancer actually takes a real hold and starts to become life-threatening. And so GC-MAF is effectively a reboot to the immune system.
Right, well, hang on. GC-MAF has 21 positive effects in the body. Yes, it rebuilds the immune system, but that's only 1.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it activates macrophages, it prevents secondaries, it stops angiogenesis, and angiogenesis is the growing of blood vessels into cancer tumours. And without blood, of course, tumours don't live. So GC-MAF stops angiogenesis, which means a tumour can't grow beyond 1 or 2 millimetres in size. So, GC-MAF has a lot of attacks. And we published 6 attacks that GC-MAF has on other diseases. It's other diseases that it prevents, including autism, chronic fatigue syndrome, and radiation. It stops radiation as well.
So on the basis that it is now reported that 1 in every 3 people will contract some form of cancer in the course of their life, that's estimated to increase to 1 in 2 by 2025, and to increase to every single person on the planet by 2040.
It'll be faster than that with 5G.
I was just going to say, with the rollout of 5G, which we know that the EMF is carcinogenic, and the microwave EMF is carcinogenic on steroids. So the increased rate at which people are going to suffer cancer is going to be horrendous. And yet we now have the clear evidence, although the media will dismiss it as obviously snake oil, etc., but we have the clear evidence that there is an extremely effective cancer treatment which has proven to put people into full remission.
Right. Well, I mean, you would think it would be impossible to dismiss, because there are now 1,000 research papers on Google Scholar on GC-MAF. And you would have thought, with the weight of that evidence, which will make people fall over, it's so heavy, that would stop. But no. And then of course, there are 150 scientific research papers in the world's top scientific journals, of which 33 are ours, written by our own scientists, and my name is on 6 of them, so I'm down forever in the scientific journals as an author on these scientific research papers. And then, of course, half of our research papers, and in fact 70 in total, have made it through to the US National Library of Medicine, or PubMed. And, you know, you could read any one of these 3 places and realize that that is the cure for cancer, done by so many scientists, it's irrefutable. I mean, there's a paper done in 2003 by the journal Neoplasia, and it's by 7 different research institutes from 5 different nations, and it lists 6 attacks that GCMAF has on cancer. And then, of course, there's the one by Japan's top 5 research institutes, including the Atomic Bomb Institute of Nagasaki University. Remember, we've dropped a bomb on that. And loads of people still have cancer there today. And, you know, they have a picture on page 4 of liver tumours in mice, shrunk 90% in 3 weeks by GCMAF. And, you know, the quality of these papers is so high, they can never be dismissed. And yet, Sarah Wollaston MP was misled Parliament by disgustingly saying that particular paper was by nebulous sources. You can't get better.
I mean, she's a GP, or was a GP.
Yeah, well, she's a louse. She's not a GP. She's disgusting. I mean, if she had stood up in Parliament and said GCMAF is, well, obviously, she's only got to read that one paper and she knows GCMAF is cure for cancer, she could have saved 500,000 people from the 9th of December 2014. Her comments are in Hansard on that date. When she lied to Parliament, to today, she could have saved 500,000 lives. No. Sarah Wollaston is a murderer, like them all.
That's Sarah Wollaston, just in case anybody is in any doubt who we're talking about. That's Sarah Wollaston. She is the MP who defected from the Tory party a few weeks ago to become one of the new change, or whatever they want to call them. But of course, there's no question that she's ever going to bring about change. You know, she's clearly demonstrated that she's in the pockets of the corporatocracy. And, you know, she made the statement a decade ago that she was entering politics to bring about positive change to the healthcare system. Well, if her idea of bringing positive change is to continually suppress a very effective cancer treatment, then God help us.
She gets money, she says in her parliamentary declaration, she gets money from Flow Ideas Limited, who have links to Henry Angst, and he was a director of Dow Pharmaceuticals. So she is Big Pharma.
Yeah, the lobbying, of course, this is how politicians are effectively controlled. And whilst I acknowledge that some politicians go into public office with every intention of portraying an altruistic demeanour and make a positive change, they very quickly realise or are tapped to realise that actually, you know, the only way in which they're really going to bring about change is by representing the corporations who lobby on the behalf of the corporations.
Yeah.
So anyway, David, you have now endured 5 months of Wandsworth Prison. This is not necessarily the forum to talk about the prison system, because I want to keep the focus on GCMAF and its deliberately being withheld from the general public. But I know that you wouldn't recommend Wandsworth Prison on TripAdvisor.
Well, it's built in 1851. It's filthy. The food is absolutely disgusting. I lost 1 stone and 3/4. I've got 8 illnesses. 3 autism psychologists said I've got autism and I should never go there. But they still took 1 month to release me. They couldn't be bothered to sign the paperwork. There's a lot of very nice prisoners in there who are completely innocent. What happens is, if you have money, £1 million worth of houses, I mean, there's one guy got two houses worth over £500,000. They're London houses, so that's not difficult. So what they did is they put him in prison. And what they normally do is they imprison your wife and say she'll go to prison as well, unless that you plead guilty to some charge of which you're innocent. So then they bring in the Proceeds of Crime Act 2003, one of 3,000 European laws illegally on our statute books, and they steal your house, and then they value it, in the case of this prisoner, at 265,000 for the 2 houses, when they're actually both worth £1 million, over £1 million, and then they set it off cheap to their friends. So in the Proceeds of Crime Act, the court is supposed to get 50% of the proceeds that they steal from you. So they stole all our bank accounts, and the court gets 50% of that. But actually, they tend to keep more. So, and when they steal these houses, they'll keep that. So the corruption is actually written into the British legal system, and this is part of the European Union, and it's the European Union that's prosecuting me under the European EAW, European Arrest Warrant. They want me to do 12 years over there for GCMAF. So I'm being prosecuted twice by EU laws. I wouldn't be prosecuted at all under British common law and the British Constitution, but of course all that got illegally swept away by the European Union. I just can't get over how naive Remainers are, who are being swept into a dictatorship. I mean, the European commissioners are unelected and all become millionaires in the first year. European MPs, poor sods, have to wait about three years to become a millionaire. But the European Union is so corrupt, it is a dictatorship, and you have to be in Wandsworth Prison or somewhere like that before you feel the full effects of it, and I hope all the Remainers end up there.
Well, I won't necessarily go that far, but I understand the sentiment. But we now have a situation where it is irrefutable that you, along with those who worked with you, have been persecuted for actually having the audacity to develop an extremely effective cancer treatment which would benefit literally millions of people. The corporatocracy don't want that. They want to retain their dominion. And not only have they persecuted you by keeping you obviously waiting to come to court for 3.5 years, they bullied you into pleading guilty. The judge fortunately decreed that there should be a Newman hearing, so at least he could hear the mitigation before passing sentence. But then he subsequently decided that you would be sentenced to 12 months, which was a lot less than the MHRA was seeking.
14 years.
14 years. So, you know, the MHRA did not exactly achieve what they intended to achieve, which might explain the crass video that they put out after the judge had passed sentence. Of that sentence, you also had 3 months for supposedly living on the proceeds of crime.
We didn't live. All we did was cure people. We were at it, you know, we had 8 patients a day in our house. We were treating thousands every year. We attended 20 conferences every year. We wrote 16 scientific research papers every year. We were absolutely flat out. There wasn't enough. Well, we probably had 2 one-week holidays a year in the Mediterranean. That was it. So what did we get out of the business? Well, actually, just the 2 one-week holidays. Even our house was a clinic for 8 patients a day. So what did we get out of it? Well, nothing.
Well, I was just going to make the observation that, you know, the amount of revenue that you generated by selling GCMAF is actually less than the annual compensation and benefits package paid to the CEO of GSK. So the rewards for actually killing people are enormous.
Yes.
The rewards for killing people, for curing people, are incarceration and destitution.
That's right. So for killing 83,000 with Avandia, the CEO, who is a woman, of GSK gets 7 million a year, every year. We got 7 million over 6 years, and out of that 7 million, we had to pay for the laboratory, for all the years we had it open, for the clinics, for the office, for 27 staff, and for a huge amount of conference and travel time, and what was left for us? Well, there was a little bit left, and the MHRA stole every penny. So we really did make absolutely nothing. So we've already had all our bank accounts closed, and now they're going to come at us under the Proceeds of Crime Act. Don't forget, every prosecution almost in England now has a second European part to the prosecution, the proceeds of crime. So any money that you have, they are going to take off you, all of it. Whether it's proceeds of crime or not, they really don't care. They're going to have it. So we still have a few insignificant morsels left, and they are going to take those from us.
Well, even Justice Lorraine Smith, though, he was clearly troubled by the proceeds of crime allegations, and I think that reflects why he only added 3 months to the sentence, because he made the observation that normally, in his experience of dealing with anyone who is charged with living on the proceeds of crime, they normally try and conceal it. Whereas he was very quick to make the observation that you and the others who had been charged with you had all been completely open about the finances, and there was no attempt to conceal anything. So, he felt obliged almost to add sort of 3 months to the sentence because obviously there had been revenue generated, but I don't think he was very comfortable with that.
No, and I still think our lawyers are working for the government in as much as they tend to ensure that we are absolutely penniless by the time all this is over. And don't forget, when it's all over, it isn't over. We're then supposed to serve 12 years in France, the worst prisons in Europe, and I won't survive 1 year. I'll be dead in 1 year in a French jail.
We're coming to the end of our segment, David, and I think that's an important point. You're not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination,
no.
Because you are here on tag. We are actually recording this on the afternoon of Thursday, May the 2nd, because it will be broadcast at 7:30, but you have to be back in your designated residence by 7 p.m, and this will continue through until July.
Yeah.
You've got the proceeds of crime investigation.
Yeah.
You've got the extradition hearing,
Yeah.
where the OSCELEP, the French equivalent of the MHRA, are trying to get you extradited to face identical charges in France, and obviously the MHRA and Big Pharma are hoping that you don't just get 12 months there, that you get 12 years and that you won't see the light of day again.
Well, it is, of course, the MHRA that contacted OCELEP. They're even more corrupt, opposite numbers in France, to prosecute us over there, because the MHRA want us to get us locked away for 25 years to make absolutely certain GCMAF is hidden for half a century, 2 quarter centuries. And thanks to Sarah Olaston, it may well be it'll be that long. But there are smaller companies around the world making GCMAF, so it's not finished yet. And you're doing great stuff keeping the truth out before the public, Ian. And I very much hope that GCMAF makes it into the NHS. As I said on my statement when I was arrested, our intention is still to get GCMAF into the NHS, where it will save 120,000 lives every year. And it will only save 120,000 of the 160,000 who die of cancer every year if they do it badly.
Well, I lost my sister a few years ago to virulent cancer. Obviously, she went down the path of orthodoxy, and I effectively saw the life force drained from her as a result of her chemo. And consequently, there's absolutely no possibility that I would ever, regardless of the circumstances, I would ever subject myself to those aggressive treatments. And, for anybody watching this, we are in a situation now where I'm pretty sure that pretty much everyone watching this knows of somebody who has suffered cancer and has been subjected to radiotherapy, to chemotherapy. You may know of a few people who are actually still living as a result of chemo radiotherapy, but it gets you eventually. But as we've said all along, don't take our word for it. Do your research. The mainstream obviously tries to demonize, and the ad hominem attack on David over the last few years has been, truly outrageous, because they want to keep the focus on the emotive issues of the snake oil salesman. They don't want people looking at the research papers, and particularly the papers that can be accessed on PubMed, which is the American Library of Medical Publications. They don't want people looking at this, and they certainly don't want people within the medical establishment actually questioning the 1939 Cancer Act. So, David, we're going to play in a second a video by a lady by the name of Terry Davis Newman, who was one of your patients.
Yes.
And she's written this book, which I'll put the link up to under the video, but it's called Mass Murdering Doctors, The Truth About Oncologists, Chemotherapy and Cancer. And it's an outstanding read, and we're going to see a short 5-minute video of Terry talking about her experiences with GC-MAF. But David, I'm sure I speak for many thousands, maybe even a few millions of people when I say, thank you so much for having the courage of the conviction to research GC-MAF, to look at the efficacy of GC-MAF, and then put your neck literally on the block to produce and market this, because there are literally hundreds, if not thousands of people out there who have enjoyed a life that they would not have otherwise enjoyed had they not had access to this product. And what you have also done is you have unleashed the GC-MAF genie from the bottle. And I have no doubt that the establishment is going to do everything it possibly can to undermine this video, to get it removed from social media. And no doubt, I and you will come under further attack for trying to present GC-MAF as a viable cancer treatment. But once again, all we ask is that people do their own research. But thank you, David, so much. And my sincere apologies for setting you on this path by making that throwaway comment at Ghent University in 2009.
I should bloody well think so too. It's all your fault.
And I'd like to say I'm sorry, but I'm not. And I have nothing but the deepest respect for you and Lynn, who we'll meet in a second, and those that have worked with you in bringing this product to market.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you.
Okay, so that's David Noakes. Obviously, you haven't seen the last of David Noakes by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously, David's got to, serve out his time on tag, but I can assure you that David and others are putting a lot of time and thought into how to take this to the next step. And, Big Pharma, MHRA, and the elected representatives of the British people, you are going to be scrutinised like never before on the decisions that you take. And if those decisions have the effect of killing people, then you will ultimately be held to account. And on that note, as I say goodbye to David, we're going to watch this short video from Terry Davis Newman, and then I'm going to welcome David's partner and biochemist, Lynn Tyre, into the hot seat, and we'll have a chat with Lynn.
Great.
David, thanks
Cheers,
again.
Lynn. Thank you.
My name is Terry Davis Newman. I'm a real person. You can Google me. My doctors predicted I would die in November 2016 of terminal stage 4 ovarian cancer, specifically high-grade serous carcinoma of the ovaries and uterus. It degraded and recurred as peritoneal carcinomatosis, and this cancer has no survivors. It doubles in size every 6 weeks. My sister and I both carried the BRCA1 gene, and she died with the same cancer on the 18th of November of 2015, 90 days before I was diagnosed. It was the chemotherapy, which they billed her more than $700,000 to pay for, that killed her from 11 months after her diagnosis. This was after she was horribly mutilated with a double radical mastectomy and a hysterectomy. She bled to death in front of both of my elderly parents when her esophagus ruptured from chemo-induced vomiting. 50% of the people who have cancer die from the chemotherapy, not the cancer. There are over 100 specific research papers that say peritoneal carcinomatosis following high-grade serous carcinoma is not helped or even affected by chemotherapy, and that there's no point to it other than that chemotherapy is a huge moneymaker for the oncologist. My sister was murdered for profit. The doctors knew the chemo would kill her, and they knew it wouldn't help her, and that didn't stop them. Her obituary is on legacy.com. Her name is Lori Sutcliffe Alfrey. Lori-Sutcliffe, Alfrey, Alfrey. A dozen doctors have tried to force me to take the same chemotherapy that killed her, and I have flatly refused. Angelina Jolie and Christina Applegate are both cancer survivors who carry the same BRCA1 gene. That's why Angelina Jolie had the preventative hysterectomy and double mastectomy, the same surgery I was having that revealed my cancer. And believe me, if they ignore their doctors, they have nothing to worry about. I did my own research, and I discovered GC-MAF being made by Immunobiotech Limited in England. Their GC-MAF is genuine because they put it through 9 tests. It's not the fake being sold by other places. If there's no test, then the GC-MAF is fake, and every other product being sold as GC-MAF is not worth buying. Rerum is completely useless. Everyone I know who was using Rerum died quickly, while First Immune keeps racking up cures. If GC-MAF from First Immune didn't work, it wouldn't be a threat to Big Pharma's blood money profits. This is the only reason that First Immune, Immunobiotech are being persecuted. It is criminal activity by the government. Although GC-MAF would have been 10% of the cost of chemotherapy, I couldn't afford it, and my insurance wouldn't pay for it. Immunobiotech told me they would send it anyway at no charge, and they paid the shipping as well. They provided it to me up to the time that they were closed down by the English MHRA for the second time on February 22nd, 2017. They even paid the huge shipping charges so that they would save my life. I started taking GC-MAF on June 25th, 2016. There were no side effects, none. I felt great, plenty of energy, and no one would believe I had cancer. I wasn't bald or vomiting with mouth sores or a star skeleton. Even now, I look healthy. I have all my hair because there are no side effects to GC-MAF. I was scheduled to die in November of 2016 when my MRI showed that tumors were shrinking and that the miliary tumors had disappeared. A cancer that chemotherapy is totally ineffective against, GC-MAF was beating. I am only alive now because of GC-MAF, and if I die, it will be because Big Pharma and the corrupt MHRA closed Immunobiotech, and the MHRA and Big Pharma will be 100% liable for my death. If they kill me, I will not die silent, as I have written a book about this experience. GC-MAF is a human protein. It's the body's own way of curing cancer, and I have taken it for 8 months. My cure is not complete. Now in March 2017, I have MRI scans that continue to say that my cancer is being killed off. I would have a belly full of cancer and would have died by now if I'd allowed myself to be chemoed. I'm fit as a fiddle, and if I'd obeyed the dozen doctors who tried to force me, they did everything but hold a gun to my head. If I had listened to them, I would be dead as a doornail. The doctors, who are amazed that I am still alive, are still trying to force me to have chemotherapy. To me, Immunobiotech are angels. I owe them and David Noakes my life. There are no words I can ever express that will thank them enough for what they have done for me and their generosity. If I die because of what Big Pharma and the MHRA have done, I will die cursing them for causing my death just to protect their profits. They are the scum of the earth and deserve the fate that God will have in store for their members. They promote the murder of chemotherapy, or the murder by chemotherapy, of over 1 million people a year with their billion-dollar poison. I ran for Congress in 2010 in Illinois. I'm visible on the web. My website for my cure is www.gcmathcancercure.com, and you can see my video on Facebook. Feel free to contact me with any questions. Terry, with one R, T-E-R-I, Davis Newman, N-E-W-M-A-N, at AOL.com. Terry Davis Newman at AOL.com.
Okay, well, that was a very moving piece there from Terry Davis Newman. Now, I've replaced David in the chair alongside me with his partner and bioscientist, Lynn Tyre. Now, Lynn, I know it was very emotional for you watching that video because you knew Terry very well.
Very well. She stayed at my house. We discussed treatments and stuff like that and nutrition. And she was also very aware of GC Math and the good it could do for people. And she promoted it, and she's still promoting it even now because her sister died of it, of cancer, and she watched her sister die of chemotherapy. And the discussions we had in my house were emotional. And she needed to do Kent, so I managed to show her Spitfire flying and the White Cliffs and everything. But she still, and her family never got over what chemotherapy did to her sister. So, and I'm grateful now that I've been able to help people or to understand complex diseases and discuss them with healthcare practitioners, because I'm a biomedical scientist, so I understand the complex biochemical pathways, which a lot of people don't get. So if you understand them, you can help people through them. And if you've got something like GC Math, you've got a weapon that can stop lots of things. I'm sorry, but I'm still a bit emotional. If it's your turn to talk, because I'm a woman, I'm going to talk all night. So
that's okay. Okay, so is that permission to interrupt without getting slapped?
Yes.
Okay, no,
yes, I'm
thank
sorry.
you. That's all right. I completely understand. Now then, let's take you back a few years. So you met David, and I know you shared with me that you might regret sharing this with me, but you met David, and he took you out on a date, and one of the first questions that he asked you was, what do you know about GC Math?
Yes, and I think we had this discussion. What did you not say? You put on speakerphone, and I said it was all your fault because it is an important molecule, and David was so interested in it that eventually, even though I was working 12-hour days, when I had the opportunity, I was trying to study it, and then I was working with David with it when I could, when I got home from work. And then I met Professor Marco Ruggiero, and I went to the University of Florence, and we spoke over the phone via Skype, and we realised how important it could be. And we could see in the laboratory what was happening, and this is what the MHRA have completely disregarded. It's out there on PubMed, the scientific research that we've done, that in a Petri dish, which doesn't matter, you can see the cancer cells either being changed back to normal, or you can see them being killed if you put macrophages in with them. They're just ignoring all this scientific data. And it's important, you know. Drugs are important, fine, but using the immune system, which is part of us, and the GC Math that you introduced David to all those years ago, you are replacing a sick person with a part that, a bit like giving somebody insulin or thyroxine. It's just something like that. Yet we are going to prison for it. We're being penalised. I've just lost my father, and I'm trying at the High Court to get them to relax the conditions, because otherwise I've got a 12-year prison sentence for helping healthcare practitioners help recover their clients and recovering an immune system. They give them insulin, give them thyroxine. Why can't they give them GC Math? I'm sorry, but that's how I feel right now. It's not a difficult thing. You don't have to inject it. You can nebulize it. You can use it as a suppository, which we don't do in England. You know, and you can do it liposomal. There's ways of getting this there, and all you're doing is repairing the immune system. You're not you're not doing anything nasty to anybody. You're just helping them. Like
So that's an interesting point. So you're not doing anything nasty. So there are no serious side effects, no known serious side effects with GCMAF.
The only side effects you get are the fact when the immune system is recovering, but you recover from the flu or colds.
Yeah.
And you feel like a bit like rubbish. But that's all that happens. You may run a temperature for a couple of days, but that is just the body's immune system
readjusting.
Yeah. It's been down there, and it's going, oh, okay, I've had a little bit of help, so I'm up here. But I've got a lot of toxins I've got to shift. So when you're shifting toxins, you do feel a little bit rubbish. But if you have got a mindful healthcare practitioner, you'll be doing stuff. You'll be doing good quality water, you know, and just making sure the toxins come out by whatever means. You can't, one size doesn't fit all. So I can't say to you now, this will definitely work for everyone. What I'm saying is, once you just adjust the treatment to the patient, but GCMAF is an important part of the immune system, and it's not just us that are using it, it's all over the world now. I'm on Facebook, I'm watching it every day. It is just a part of the immune system replacement. So if I called it insulin, you go through the NHS, thyroxine, NHS, but because it's GCMAF, it's, oh my God, let's arrest them, that's fine. I've been arrested loads of times now. How many times is it this year? Oh, I don't want to discuss that in public, but it's been a few, you know, and this is what they do. And they don't understand.
It's the persecution. Yeah. So you to take this back, so after...
You lead the conversation.
Okay, after the raid on the premises back in 2015, you have never been charged with any offence in the UK.
No.
But...
They tried,
but they couldn't find anything. So the CPS decided that they would go after David and a few others, but they would not lay any charges on you. No. And then the French decided that they wanted to seek your extradition to face pretty much the identical charges that David had faced in the UK, but in France, but without a shred of evidence.
No, and this is what they're saying, you know, even now. I've been through how many years now? Oh, blimey, it's too many for me to count. I've aged quite a lot, as you may have gathered. I've been through 9 charges, and they can't find anything. And when I was at the High Court last time, I was told to listen, and they threw in an extra charge of a clandestine laboratory.
I mean, I have to say, if Judge Supperstone, and we are still waiting after, what is it now, 6 weeks? We are still waiting after 6 weeks for Judge Supperstone to make his ruling on whether or not Lynn should be extradited to France. And I am going to, after 6 weeks, because I've given Judge Supperstone plenty of time to make his ruling, but if he upholds the extradition, it will be an absolute travesty.
Yes. It will be, because when I was first contacted by the French via OCLS, which is MHRA but French, and it is I've checked it out, as good as my French is, which is that good, really. They are run by big pharmaceutical.
No, of course.
So there's the corporatocracy there. And I've been willing to cooperate all through it. But at some point, my case was handed over from one English lawyer to the ones that you know about, that I'm not going to say anything about right now because I'm too angry. And the full cooperation was there, but there was no video link offered, no nothing. They just want me over there for pre-trial detention to make an example.
Well, and obviously they've been waiting for David to come out of jail now so that they can try and link the cases, link the applications, and obviously with a view to sending you both to France. And if that happens, then the likelihood is that you would not be allowed bail, but you would be held on remand in France. And it does seem that it is common practice for people to be on remand in France for up to 2 years. And that may be longer now that France is in complete disarray with the Gilets Jaunes protests, of course.
Yes. And when I was on the video link, obviously I wasn't part of it. I was there listening to it, but they actually said clearly I've got to be so polite here, haven't I? Because I'm not normally that polite. The judge wasn't the best. I'm not going to mention any names because that's rude. And I had the senior barrister. We had a video link with France, and he clearly described that I would have 2 years, 4 months pre-trial.
On remand.
Pre-trial in prison. And he described the prison I was going to. And what have I done?
Cured people. So I think people are getting the message. I mean, really, obviously there will be debate in the media where, 20-something journalists who have no worldly experience, they are simply cut and paste merchants. Yeah. Then they are trotted out to write the hit pieces to get people emotionally rejecting the claim that cancer can be cured. And, what we need, and we know it's happening, is increasingly people are rejecting the orthodox process. So people are saying, you know what, thanks for the diagnosis. Thanks for telling me I've got cancer. I will now take responsibility for the protocols that I adopt to treat it. And those people who are, ultimately, let me make the observation, it has to be a personal choice. If somebody feels that they want to go down the path as recommended by the oncologist, that's absolutely their prerogative. Yeah. That is a human right. But what is being removed, what has been removed from us by the corporations through the MHRA and a complicit government is that human right to make personal decisions about our own health and well-being has been removed, and that responsibility has been handed over to the corporations, but of course it's detrimental to our best interests.
Yes, what I found was working with healthcare professionals and everything, the complex diseases, they were given a pat on the head and said, yeah, forget it. But what got to me, and it made me cry quite a lot of times emotionally, is when people came to see me via their healthcare, and I work with their healthcare, I've been given 2 weeks to live. Now, where did that information come from? Why did they say it? Why didn't they give the people the emotional care that they needed at the time? And why did they try to kill them with chemo and radio? I'm sorry, but we're all here for a reason, to be loved and cared for, not to be destroyed by a government. And they're killing me, slowly and carefully and emotionally. I can't cope with this. I have had to see a lot of people to help with the emotions that go with the trauma of a persistent government persecution.
I was just looking up because Goldman Sachs issued a report that basically made the observation that curing people is not a sustainable healthcare model.
We're not allowed to say the word curing, not with cancer.
Or even any kind of effective treatment.
Yeah.
All right, let's just say effective treatments are not a sustainable business model. So, there it is, from, one of the primary financial and business investment organizations on the planet, making it very clear that there is no money in health, but there's a shed load of money in sickness.
Exactly. And who do you want there?
Yeah.
You spend time in hospital and you think of all those drugs and stuff that are going into them. It's horrendous. But Hippocrates had the right thing, didn't he? Food is like medicine. Medicine's like food.
Yeah.
He got it right. These guys have got it wrong. And I'm fed up with people like David being treated like he was for wanting to help people. He did a big job there. He didn't have to do it. I was fortunate enough to be a good friend and partner, and I had access and was allowed to travel to work with healthcare practitioners to help people recover in a holistically sympathetic, along with their chosen practitioner so that they could recover from things that they'd been stuck with for years. You know, it's okay in England because we don't have to pay for it. But when you're talking about the United States and that, they're talking millions.
Yeah, people
sometimes.
literally paying for their own demise.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, and to me that was very hurtful. I'm so grateful for him, but I'm so upset the fact that they put him in prison because of it, and they're just now waiting.
And trying to extradite him and you to France.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, this isn't over by any stretch of the imagination. As we said, the GC Math genie is well and truly out the bottle. But let me ask you one question, and that is, obviously, the last few years of your life, the last certainly 3-4 years, has been extremely traumatic. The previous 4 years was obviously extremely rewarding because of what you guys were doing and the number of people that you were helping across the planet. With the benefit of hindsight, would you do the same thing again?
Of course I bloody well would.
And David, who's just off camera at the moment. David?
Yes.
Given what you now know and given the experience of your persecution over the last 4 years, but obviously all the highs of the previous 4 years, if you had the time over again, would you have listened to that guy standing at the front of the lecture theatre in Ghent University? And would you have pursued the GC Math path?
The path has been incredibly painful. But I would say...
David, can you come over here and just say... I'm going to bring David back on camera because he's just off microphone here.
It's been incredibly painful over the last 4 or 5 years being pursued by the MHRA. We have been through hell and back. But it would have been worth it to save just one human life. And we've saved 8,000 from disease and 800 from cancer. So was it worth it? I wouldn't miss it for the world. Thank you.
And what can I say? Thank you, guys. This is not over by any stretch of the imagination. Do your research, GC Math, cancer, effective cancer treatments. I was almost in danger of contravening the 1939 Cancer Act there. But effective cancer treatments do exist. They are being deliberately suppressed by the pharmaceutical industry and by their puppet government bodies like the MHRA and by complicit politicians. Get the word out there. These people have put their lives on the line for the benefit of humanity. It's up to us to acknowledge their sacrifice and get GC Math into the market and available to those who need it, which means that it must never become the domain of the pharmaceutical industry, because the pharmaceutical industry will prostitute it, will bastardize it, will make sure it becomes ineffective so that they can continue to claim that the only effective treatments are chemo and radiotherapy. Ultimately, the choice must be yours. But our governments and the corporatocracy want to try and make it theirs. So, down to each and every one of us. Collectively, the changes that we can bring about are enormous. But first of all, we have to take that first step and be absolutely committed to the conviction that GC Math is what it's claimed to be, and that the pharmaceutical industry is doing everything it possibly can to suppress it. So my thanks to David, to Lynn, to everybody else that you've been working with over the previous years to bring this to market. And one can only hope that collectively we can do whatever needs to be done to bring about the end of the suffering that you've been subjected to.
But I would like to thank everybody that has supported both of us throughout, all the time. I just can't say thank you enough for the messages, the text, the WhatsApps. This is what makes a difference. And seeing people recover is very emotional when you've got somebody that's been given 2 weeks to live and they're still alive now. Now, to me, I can't thank any spirit, whoever you believe in, I can't thank them enough. It's emotional, and I'm so grateful to be here. And yes, I would do it again. And yes, I will risk that prison sentence. They are not going to take me down. Trust me, they are not going to take me down. I will go down fighting. Whichever way I've got to fight, whether it's hands-on or legally. But I'm going to fight this bastards. I'm going to fight them. Sorry, wrong word.
On that note, and I share the sentiment. But on that note, I'll be back with you tomorrow morning at 8:30 with my morning live streams. And obviously, I'll be regularly updating on the state of play with David and with Lynn. And obviously, whenever there is a court hearing, I will let people know. And it is so, so, so important that the public gallery of the courtroom is packed, because the judiciary and the industry and the MHRA need to know that they will be scrutinised and they will ultimately be held to account for their genocide. Thanks a lot. See you tomorrow morning.